Hello and welcome to the B&H virtual event space. Today we've brought back Russell Graves of Hackberry Farm Nature Photography Workshop fame. Today he'll be going over capturing dynamic images of people in the outdoors. How are you doing today, Russell?
Good. How about you, Fred?
Good, hanging in there. Thanks so much.
Good.
Your presentations are always chock full of information, but before I go, I'd just like everyone to know that if you have any questions, to please leave them in the chat. We'll address them at the end. Let's not waste any more of your time, Russell. Please take it away.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks for having me again. And welcome, everybody. Let me get this screen shared real fast. There we go. I think everybody can see it now. Thanks, everybody, again. Again, my name is Russell Graves. If you haven't listened to me before, I'm coming to you live from Hackberry Farm here in Dodge City, Texas. And it's always a beautiful day here at Hackberry Farm, and today's especially beautiful. Temperatures have cooled off for the summer. We're having nice fall like temperatures. It's supposed to change a little bit, but for the most part, it's great. I love this time of year, by the way. And this month, actually, if I remember correctly, and I need to look back on this, I should have done my homework a little better, but I just thought about this right before we came on live. But I think this month is the 20th anniversary of me going digital. I'm almost 100% certain about that. I'd have to look back at the metadata. And the reason I remember September is because of a certain thing that me and my daughter went in the outdoors and did. And why that's significant is I've been taking pictures for a long time. If you've never heard my story before, I got my first camera when I was probably 16 or 17 years old, old Vivitar film camera, and really loved photography. And was really encouraged to do it by my family. And so I wanted to be a magazine photographer. And so when I was 19 years old, I had my first pictures and an article that I wrote in a magazine here in Texas. And when I was 20, I had my first cover. And my thought was, if you can make money doing this, I am in. But really early on, I pigeonholed myself. And because when you shot, if those of you in the audience, if you've ever shot film before, you understand it's a little bit limiting. Every time I would press the button on my camera, it's like I could hear a cash register going off in my ear, because for a roll of film and processing, 36 pictures, by the way, of slide film. And I shot slide film back in the day because back then that's all the magazines would take were slide images. They wouldn't take negative film. And so 36 images cost me $12 for film and processing. Now, it doesn't sound like a ton of money, but think about if you go out on a shoot now with the digital camera and shoot 4,000 or 5,000 pictures, how many equivalent $12 rolls of film would that be? And so early on, I pigeonholed myself in the fact that I only shot pictures of things that couldn't talk back to me, wildlife and cows and farm scenes and all the kind of rural stuff that I've kind of made my life's work since then. Documenting all those things is what I really did in the past. And so it wasn't until digital photography came along again, if I remember correctly, it was 20 years ago when I got my first camera. And what reason I remember that is my daughter, I took her fishing, and Canon had I got a loaner camera from Canon, and it was the Canon 10D. And I went and shot some pictures of her when we were going on a fishing trip on a farm pond, and she was 4 years old at the time, and so she'll be 24 this week. And I shot that picture of her. Then I had it enlarged into a 20 by 30, and it looked great. And that was like a 6.3 megapixel camera, but the print I made looked great. And so a couple of things turned on in my head at that point. Number one, I knew that digital photography was going to change everything for me, at least from a professional standpoint. And number two, I got more willing to experiment. And part of what I got willing to experiment on are taking pictures of people and pictures of people in the outdoors. And just my ability to do that and at least capture. Look, I've never said I'm the best photographer in the world. I would never say that. But being able to take pictures at a level and take dynamic and believable pictures of people in the outdoors is what I made my life's mission doing. And it really helped me out professionally from that standpoint. So today there's a few tips and tricks I've learned along the way to really try to help you work on that skill set for yourself and just get better at taking pictures of people in the outdoors. And so as we go further, let me share a few notes with you just so you can kind of understand where I'm coming from on all these pictures. By the way, I think there may be one or two, but most all these pictures you're looking at in this presentation today were published at some point in a magazine or in an ad campaign or in some other kind of publication. They were all published at some point. And so with that said, a few notes I have is this isn't a portrait webinar. These pictures I'm going to show you are more from a photojournalistic perspective. I'm not a classically trained photojournalist. My college degree is in agriculture science. And I picked up photography because it satisfied a creative urge I had in me. And it was really the medium that paired well with my ability to write and my ability to tell stories. And so that's what I picked up. So I learned, if I learn these things I'm going to teach you today from any standpoint, it's not from a portrait standpoint, but more from a photojournalistic perspective. And I think most people, at least most people I deal with, they may do a few portraits, but they're more interested in capturing pictures of their kids or their grandkids or people they know or their spouse or whatever else. By the way, I need to give a shout out on this publicly, just so my wife can say it. Our daughter's birthday is the day after tomorrow, the 12th, I think it is. And so she'll be 24 years old. So happy birthday to her. And then tomorrow, September 11th, I know it's a date that lives in infamy, but we were married before that happened. But tomorrow is my wife and I's 31st wedding anniversary. So we've been married for a long, long time now. I know she's not listening right now, but at least I've done my part and recognized that date. So you guys can help vouch for me on that if I forget to tell her happy anniversary tomorrow. And so in this presentation, I don't work with professional models and I don't photograph weddings or babies or senior portraits. I don't mean to demean any of that stuff, but that's just not me. My goal and my job has always been, how do you take dynamic pictures of people, just regular folks doing what they do? Because again, a lot of these pictures were in some context where they were support for a magazine story, or they were doing some kind of highlight that for some kind of commercial use or whatever else. And so I have worked with professional models before, and the advantage of working with professional models is they just know how to pose and they're comfortable in front of the camera and they just know what to do when the camera's pointed at them. With non-professional models, like you'll see in this presentation, they don't always know what to do. They don't always know where to hold their hands, or they're always a little bit self-conscious because everybody wants to look good in a picture, especially if their pictures are going to be shown to a broad audience. And so some of the things I want to talk to you about today will help overcome some of the shortcomings, or not shortcomings, some of the apprehension that people have when it comes to getting their picture made. And then again, not to demean weddings, babies, or senior portraits, the people that do that stuff, one of the things I teach in another webinar I do is how to stay creative. And one of the ways I suggest is get outside your comfort zone and study other types of photography. And so whenever I'm trying to be inspired creatively, I'll look at websites that feature, top end wedding photographers or top end people who do like senior portraits or even babies, just the way they're able to interact with people. It's just an elevated art form all in itself. And then again, so since I specialize in rural subjects, these are all rural people and rural scenes that you're going to see today. So there's not a lot about street photography, but again, all these lessons I'm going to talk about today translate to whether you're shooting pictures of rural people or suburban people or urban people or whatever. People are people, and they're kind of all wired the same way. And so again, some of these things I want to talk to you about really translates to all kinds of different photography. So with that said, like Fred said earlier, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat and we'll get to those towards the end. And so before we go any further, I'll just tell you about the gear I use. It's all nothing exotic about it. I use Canon cameras. I don't put the specific model because that doesn't matter. Again, I'd mentioned before in my story that I've started shooting digital with Canon 10D. And if I picked up a Canon 10D today and used it, I could take the same pictures that I'm taking with the Canon R5s that I use today. And then kind of my basic kit that I use for the different styles of portraiture that I'll do of people in the outdoors is a 16 to 35 millimeter lens, f2.8, a 50 millimeter f1.4 lens. By the way, just so you know, these are all the EF lenses, but I adapt them to mount to the RF mount. I haven't made the investment to upgrade my lenses to the newer ones yet because the old lenses still work good. So, and they work good on the mirrorless cameras. So I just keep adapting them and use them till the wheels fall off of them, so to speak. And this lens here, this 85 millimeter f1.2. If I had to say I had two favorite portrait lenses, it's the 50 millimeter f1.4 and the 85 millimeter f1.2. One of the things I really, really like doing, and you'll see it reflected in some of the pictures I'll show you today, is I really like taking pictures of people like I take pictures of wildlife. I like the background to be really, really out of focus. And I accomplish that by shooting at f1.4, f1.2, or whatever. But you got to be careful there. There's this, there's sometimes too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. And especially with that 85 f1.2, you can have such a thin depth of focus. It's hard to get even just someone's eye in focus and even part of their nose in focus. And then I've got a 770 to 200 millimeter. I neglected to put the f-stop on that, but that's the old version f2.8 lens. And when I say old version, I don't mean the version 2 EF version. I mean, I think that's the original version of that lens, because I've had that lens since I started shooting Canon, maybe, gosh, 25 years or more ago. I started shooting Canon. That was the first 70 to 200 millimeter white lens I've had. It looks like it's been ran over 50 times by a truck. It's got a few scratches on the glass that I consider it just, that's the character it gives the pictures that I take. It's an old lens. I've tried to take pretty good care of it. In other words, I haven't dropped it at all, or I haven't dropped it much if I've dropped it at all. And so it still works good and it still performs well. So I still like using that lens as well. And then one of the key things I'll do, and I'll point this out as we go through so you can kind of see as I break down some of the pictures. I like the gold reflectors. They that to me, they give a pleasing quality of light, and I'll tell you specifically why I use gold reflectors in a minute. And usually I'll have a 3 wireless flash setup. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of the technicalities about how to use wireless flash, but that's maybe one of the greatest inventions. And when I got to that point, I was willing to experiment. I started looking at websites like the Strobus and things like that to see how people use flashes, or Joe McNally, and see how people use flashes creatively. And so I started bringing flashes into the mix and learning how to use flash photography. Now, there was a time when flash photography was complicated. I mean, back when people shot film and you'd take a picture and you could, unless you had one of those Polaroid backs, you couldn't see the results you're getting. So everything kind of had to be intuitive. But now with digital and with the technology we have, honestly, if you buy a dedicated flash, whether you shoot Nikon or Sony or Canon, if you buy a dedicated flash, they may work with third-party flashes. I just don't know it. But if I buy Canon flashes for my Canon cameras, it all has through the lens, the TTL metering with the flash. All you have to do is turn the flash on. It figures out the exposure for you. You may have to make a couple of tweaks, but it's really dummy proof in that point when you can put flashes around, use the wireless controller to control them without cords. And it's miraculous what it'll do with photography and how it helps you out. And so here's the strategies we're talking about today. Again, if you have any questions as we go along, just feel free to mention the particular strategy, and I'll just tell you how I do it. And so one of the first things I tell people is take 5, and then the subject will indicate how to pose them. What I mean by take 5 is don't rush to get the pictures. A lot of times, and the setup that I do a lot of times, a magazine, and I'm working on a couple of assignments right now. A magazine will say, okay, this is the topic that we want you to write about, or if they hire me to photograph for someone else's article, here's the article, read the article. And so this is the subject of the magazine piece that you need to go take a picture of. And then so I'll know a little bit about the person, but when I get on site with them, I usually don't rush to even get my camera out. First thing I want to do is take 5 minutes and just talk to them, get to know them a little bit, kind of put them at ease. Because again, not professional models that I work with, usually people are usually a little bit nervous sometimes about getting a picture made. And then as I take 5 and they start to relax, I start kind of taking mental cues about how they like to stand, or when they let their guard down, and how they like to stand, or where they may gravitate to, or what they do with their hands, things like that. And so by taking the time at first and not even getting your camera out and just getting to know them, talking about what they do or their job, if you pay attention, they'll kind of indicate what the best way to pose them is. And everyone has their way that they're most comfortable with. Now you can tweak from there, but from there, again, it's common in Texas. It may be common everywhere else, but men like to put their hands in their pockets. So these are all some examples of some pictures I took for different purposes and how people stand. In fact, the difference was the guy on the right, on the lower right, we were outside of his ranch, and he was telling us a couple of funny stories about the place. So he was really open to getting his picture made. This is a picture I actually shot for a commercial shoot for a boot company one time. And this thing, it looks blurry when you look at it. And I've got to say, as a caveat, I shot this with a tilt shift lens. I wanted everything to go blurry but his face, and his face is pretty sharp, but everything else goes really blurry. That was kind of the from an artistic design standpoint. But again, every time I took pictures of these people, as I stood there and talked to them, they would kind of indicate, where they're most comfortable standing. And so when I did introduce the camera, I'd keep talking to them. We'd be talking about, like the guy on the left, he's a cotton farmer. What, tell us how was your crop last year? Or what's your dog's name or whatever. And as he talked, he'd look around and is he's explaining his farm or whatever else he's looking around. And at that point, when he starts standing naturally is when I start shooting pictures. And another thing I found is really, really helpful is give people something to do. People, again, I found that they're a little bit self-conscious when you first start trying to take the pictures, but if you give them 5 minutes to kind of get to know them and then give them something to do after that, in other words, I'll tell them, just in this case, this is my daughter. In fact, this was when she was, I think, about 8 years old. This was for a magazine shoot about pumpkin farms here in Texas. And so I couldn't find the right pose for her. But so what I gave her something to do, I put a pumpkin in her hands. And so she started talking and kind of really coming out of her shell and really gave me a good smile and was able to, I was able to get that engagement that I was really looking for. And again, just kind of show and tell. You remember how it was in show and tell. I remember when I was in college and I took speech classes, which I've always been able to stand up in front of people and talk. But when you're doing it in front of new people, it's always a little bit disconcerting. And I always found that instead of having to stand there and give a memorized talk for 20 minutes for my speech class, it was always easier and I was always much more relaxed to do a show and tell. And I think that same thing applies to if you're a little kid in school. In the same way, everyone always looked forward to show and tell. And so if I give people something to do, it may tell them this cotton farmer, his name is Bruce. Bruce, show me some of your cotton that you're growing this year. Simple instruction, but he struck a natural pose and was showing me his cotton there in front of his machinery. And then this young man, what I gave him something to do is just tell him to he was a horse trainer and just walk your horses around in circles. And we'll, I'll move to where I need to move to get the position I need to get in. And just so happened the light was really dramatic against this canyon wall. This is out in the Texas panhandle. Again, these are all rural people in rural places kind of doing what they do.
Hey, Russell.
Hey,
just before you get too far into the presentation, we had a question about one of the earlier pictures,
okay.
the slide that had the three gentlemen. How did you manage to get the dog to pose so perfectly?
he was just listening to me talk. I don't know. That's just I was looking at these pictures this morning and there was 2 or 3 other ones that their dog's not looking at me or his eyes are closed, but he just happened to be looking at me, and this is my favorite one. But that goes to the point that once people become relaxed around you, just start shooting pictures, because now with digital, I mean, literally, I'd mentioned how much it cost earlier with film, but now with digital, it's literally like, I'm not a gambler, but it's how I would imagine shooting pictures with a digital camera would be like going to a casino and using the casino's money to play the slot machines. You can't lose. Just keep pulling the lever or keep pushing the button until you get to something that hits. And that's kind of what I try to do here. Once people sort of get used to me and are comfortable around me. Let's see, we were back here. There we go. And this is a picture that was for a magazine story called Farming for Fireflies. And the whole story was about really taking an old farm and kind of converting it back to native grasses where it benefits all the bugs and that wildlife and everything else that lives on the place. And this young man here was plowing the ground. And so what I told him to do is just get out and just check his work and see what the progress he's making. And really, when you do pictures like this, people don't always, to me, you don't always have to look at the camera. I think the goal is to capture people. When you tell them to do something, you're hoping to capture them in sort of a natural setting. This is actually a magazine cover here on this one. So this lady, she's a metal artist. She used a cutting torch and a welder to make metal art that she would sell to people. And so for this particular story, uh, just trying to figure out what the right look to give her, it was, it been easy to kind of pose her anywhere to take a picture, but really when you do that, you don't get the sense of what she does. And so what I gave her something to do was adjust her cutting torch, get the cutting torch ready like you're about to go to work. What you can't see is I had my assistant that night. He was behind the door that you can't see, running a grinder, making sparks to go behind her, even though it looks like they're right behind her. They're a few feet away. So she was in no danger, but using not only the light source of the building inside, which is an ugly kind of fluorescent light, the sparks of the grinder, the light coming from the heat of the torch, and then I had a single flash to the right of her, or to the camera right, a single flash firing through an umbrella to give it a little bit of soft lighting, and all that sort of balances together in camera. It's really not a whole lot of heavy lifting. And then this guy is a luthier. He would make and repair stringed instruments. And so when I was first talking to him, he was a little bit apprehensive about it, getting his picture made. But I just told him to play me a fiddle tune, and that's what he started doing. And he instantly became comfortable. And I was able to shoot this picture. This is the example of shooting with a 85 millimeter f1.2 lens. Is, his hands are important. Everything to the front of the camera is important. But what to me was most important was his expression and trying to get that look of satisfaction in knowing that he's satisfied with the work that he does. And so that all that kind of takes place with the first step I told you is take 5 minutes and just kind of, and maybe longer than 5 minutes, but take enough time to get to know somebody where they're comfortable with you. Ask questions about them, what makes them tick. People love talking about themselves, and I don't mean that from a narcissistic or egotistical standpoint, but if someone takes the time to say, tell me about what you do, and you show a genuine interest in it, they relax. And then when you give them something to do, all of a sudden the pictures just start to reveal themselves right in front of you. And another lesson that I learned a long time ago is, and I say this because I've got a picture of my young fiance back, probably that I took of her back in, I'm going to say it's like 1991 or 1992. We started dating. We've been together now. We started dating at 20. I'm 54 now. So we've been together for 34 years. I took a picture of her when we were probably 21 or 22, something like that. And at the time, you're taught keep the sun at your back when you're shooting pictures of anything in the outdoors. And so I had the sun at my back, but the problem was it was like a blowtorch. She was looking into a blowtorch, and just the look on her face was, to me, she's beautiful, and the pictures were nice, but you could tell she was struggling a little bit because she was having to look into the sun. So one of the things I learned to keep everybody happy is have people look away from the sun. In other words, put the sun at their back or put them in the shade. And I'm going to tell you why. So here's a picture of a local organic farmer, small farmer, that I did for a magazine. And, when sometimes people can't, and there may be people in the audience that are like this. You can't be in the outdoors without having sunglasses on. You just naturally squint a lot. Well, that squint look is not a good look for people when you're trying to make pictures of them. And it's also, wearing sunglasses isn't a good look for people if you're trying to connect them with the audience. People want to see other people's eyes. And so easy way to alleviate that is just backlight everything. And this is where time of day and the timing as a photographer, when you kind of produce the shoot, really is super important to me, because typically, and this is I took this picture years ago, but this is a big look today. If you go through Facebook and look at pictures of family photographers or senior photographers, a lot of people backlight now. That's a big look, kind of that dreamy sort of out of focus look. And I'm not going to sit here and say I pioneered it all, but I just learned early on, if you put the sun at people's back and you backlight, it still has a really nice quality of light, and then that people don't squint. And so that not squinting, that's the key takeaway on that part. So like this shot here of, I used to be a teacher, and this is one of my former students, and this is a picture of Jared for a magazine story I did. I had his back to the sun, but you can see here where off to the left of the frame, I had a gold reflector. And so I used that reflector because the sun was off his right shoulder a little bit, and I had him in a little bit of the shade. You can't see a tree to the right. So the camera right, there's a shade tree, sun's kind of behind him. And so I had him in the shade, had his back to the sun, and then over to the camera left, the left side of the frame as you're looking at it, I had a gold reflector bouncing light back up underneath his hat. And you can see once I explain that, you can see how lighter the right side of his face is compared to the left side where it's a little more in the shadow. But that, and you use that directional lighting. And usually what I do is I think about, and this may have been written about before, I don't know, because again, this isn't a master class in portrait photography. It's just kind of more country logic in my mind. A good angle of light is I think in 45s. If you kind of start from 45 degrees off the subject's nose is a good place to sort of start the light from. And that's where I had it here, is about 45 degrees off of his nose, just to bounce light back into his eyes. So you get a little bit of catch light, you get, you keep people from squinting, and you get that good natural look. This guy, he's one of the greatest people I know. And he's also just a good personality and has a great smile. And I wanted that to come through. So when people saw the picture of him in this magazine, it just came across naturally as he's just a nice, all around wholesome kind of guy. And if I had him facing the sun where he was squinting, he couldn't have that natural look. So face people away from the sun. This is these are three cool guys. If I'm going to say something pretty esoteric real quick, but follow me, because I don't know the makeup of the audience and what people watch and what people don't watch. The guy on the left, if you've ever, you may have seen him before. If you ever watch Bigfoot documentaries, he's in a lot of those Bigfoot documentaries. This is actually a story I did for a magazine. It's called The Bigfoot Hunters. And so they showed up at my place the middle of the day. We weren't actually hunting Bigfoot. We were pretending like we were hunting Bigfoot. I just need to get the pictures. So they showed up on my property in the middle of the day. And you can see my solution to keep them from squinting, even though they are wearing sunglasses. That was all part of the look that we prescribed for this. But you can see the sun kind of peeking through the trees at the very top of the image. And so the whole point was keep their back to the sun, face them away. And then I used brought flashes in to illuminate the scene to keep them completely out of the shadow to balance it. And this is another good example here. This was for a story I shot about beekeepers. And this is, look at this. This is a part of Texas I used to live in. You can't see a house for miles from there. There's a barn right over in here I can see because I know where it's at, but this is pretty barren country out here. And I wanted to shoot this picture of this beekeeper. His name is Gary. I wanted to shoot a picture of him at later in the evening, and really to keep him from squinting in the sun and really control the glare off his sunglasses. The solution was to put his back to the sun and then bring in light. And this is I think a 2-flash setup just to bring enough light in to illuminate him. And again, if you follow the shadows, there's a shadow on his back, there's a shadow here on his face. And so the lights are off the right side of the frame about 45 degrees away. And then by bringing the light in and balancing him, if we take the lights away, he's going to be in shadow. But by bringing lights in, we've got some detail to his face. And then we've also got the added benefit of the backlighting of the smoke from the smoke canister for his bees that we're able to kind of to pick up as well. And so there's a lot of reasons why I like this picture. Now I talk about pictures like this and they sound fairly technical if you're a novice to photography, but shots like this are not really technical because again, if you use the modern flashes, the through the lens metering flashes and cameras, and then the cameras tend to do all the heavy lifting for you. I mean, the flashes and the cameras tend to do all the heavy lifting for you. All you really have to do is just do some tweaking from time to time. So again, take 5, give people something to do, and then make sure they're not facing the sun. And just because they're not, I mean, just that one little trick of not facing the sun, you'll get a lot better expressions. People are willing to work with you longer too, because if they're staring at the sun for 5 minutes, that gets kind of old. And so it's the whole name of the game from all these things that we're talking about so far is just to do things and get people to relax. And then another trick I do a lot of times, and let me differentiate here. There's one thing about showing you something. There's another thing when you say, "Well, show me how you do that." You'll see a picture later on in this presentation. I think is the last picture in the presentation, but a guy doing a rope trick. He was talking about how you could do some rope tricks, and I said, "Well, show me how you do that." And because I got him to demonstrate something for me. Uh, he was able to really provide some really nice and dynamic pictures. And then this young man on the right, this was for a story for a national magazine about his leadership in the agriculture industry and him being a young farmer in East Texas and the things he did. And that was actually his aunt that was there in his farm that day. And so we he was talking to me about how he'll help the customers this is a pick your own farm. So he'd let people come out and pick their own peas. And so I was telling him, well, kind of show me what you do when you go through the whole process and people do this. And so that's what he's doing is demonstrate. I got him to do something, demonstrate something. And so just getting his mind off me, getting his mind on something else, and just that interaction of showing off what they do makes a big thing. And again, you can see all of these things we're talking about today, again, go towards helping someone relax. And then this picture here, this was my son when he was really, really young. And so, getting pictures of him before, typical little kid stuff. I think he was probably about 2 when I took this picture. Typical little kid stuff, but this was we gave him a piece of watermelon. This is the first watermelon he had ever eaten before. Now that young man's 20 years old and is in school right now. But give them something to do and just preoccupies them, and they're not occupied with other things around them. And so this picture here was of a woman rancher that she was just going about her daily chores. And so I just said, show me what you do every day. I'll pretend I'm not here. I'm just going to follow you along. And that was, she was gathering up some bulk feed in that bucket to go feed some bulls. And so that just kind of happened naturally. She walked out of the barn, I mean, and that cat was standing there, just a good sort of natural moment. And I was just ready because again, I said, show me what you do during the day. And the key part is I'll just tell them, hey, pretend I'm not even here. I'm just going to take pictures. And another thing I do too, if people are really nervous, I'll add another person to the mix. And it may be someone who's connected with them. It may be someone else, but if you're wanting to get really good, relaxed, candid pictures of people, it doesn't happen necessarily accidentally. So what I like to do is I'll add another person to the mix. And this is where that 85 millimeter f1.2 lens really shines, or even the 70 to 200 millimeter lens where I can stand back a little bit and kind of be a fly on the wall. And again, take pictures from a photojournalistic standpoint where I'll put someone else in the frame for them to talk to. So that's the person on the right with someone else in the frame to talk to. And then again, just tell them, pretend I'm not here, give them something to talk about, or if they know each other, they'll figure out something to talk about, but just let them talk and let them just kind of go through their daily routine, like as if you're not there. And when you shoot over the shoulder of someone else, you get kind of a good symmetry in the image, number one, but you also get some real kind of natural looks and appearances that really help carry these pictures along. Again, and I'll say this again, this isn't necessarily portrait photography. It's more photojournalistic stuff. But if you're into going on travels and documenting your travels somewhere, or just going to the farmers market in your own town and documenting that, or going to the park in your town and documenting that, or documenting your kid's soccer game or whatever else, these tricks we're talking about is you're telling a complete story. And this is essentially, I know the term storyteller is way overused, but essentially, uh, essentially, my job is not to just take one good picture, but take a lot of pictures that whoever's laying it out has some things to choose from. Number one, but number two, if you're building a book or you're making a website gallery, you're doing a Facebook post or an Instagram post or whatever else of these pictures, you've got a variety of pictures. I'm out, like I may have a picture of this guy more posed like a portrait shot, but then I've got pictures of him talking to somebody else and just really interacting, get some good candid shots like this. This particular gentleman, he owned dog food manufacturing facility, small town of about, I think, 800 or 1,000 people. And he's on the verge of building this big business from a small town just by making a different kind of dog food. And really kind of an inspiring story and a neat story, because that family had been in the feed business for a long time, but it was all livestock feeds, and they were still doing okay with that. They still did livestock feeds, but this is second generation of the business looking to elevate it to the next level, and decided that the pet space was one they wanted to be in. And so they built a better mousetrap, and it's pretty inspiring to hear the stories like that. And this was for a grower magazine. Again, my apologies that all these are rural people. I don't apologize for it, but that, if you take away the farming and ranching and out and all the kind of rural stuff that we're talking about, again, these lessons you can apply them to any kind of photography. And these lessons I'm talking about, when you add someone else, because again, when you add someone else, they forget about you. They're not the star of the show anymore. There's someone there, and then you can use your creative abilities to help compose the picture, and then use the tools at hand to help light it. And again, this picture here has a single flash off to the left side of the frame. You can see the highlights on his cheek, because without it, the sun's kind of behind the farmer here. He was the main guy. He was the main star of the show. The sun's kind of behind him. You can see right there where it's real bright by his ear. That's the sunlight coming in. And so I had him facing away from the sun so he could take his sunglasses off and wouldn't squint. So in order to fill in that shadow, I had to bring in some artificial light. But when you do it right, it all balances out, and you don't really notice it unless you point it out. And that's what I did in this case. And then change up the angle. So the angles I'm going to show you in this aren't there. There's nothing radical, but it's where some of the wide angle stuff comes into play. And it's a pose that I use a lot, that I call the Superman pose. If you stand, I think by human nature, if you stand above someone, there's some power dynamics and some psychology in this that I can't cite off the top of my head, because again, I don't have a degree in psychology. But I know that to me, if you're going to change up the angle in which you're shooting people, usually I try to shoot at eye level with, whether I'm shooting pictures of wildlife or people, I try to be at eye level with them all the time. But if I'm going to be at any different level than eye level with them, it's rarely from a higher point of view, unless that's strictly what you're trying to do as a drone shot or something like that, where it's kind of where the people are more sort of an element in a larger graphic design. But usually if I'm going to change up the angle when I'm shooting pictures of people and the people are the subject of the picture, then usually I'll get lower, because I call it the Superman angle, because typically it makes people sort of look more powerful. These are a couple of cowgirl sisters from West Texas. This was for a calendar shoot about just working cowgirls all over the United States. And this is in particular calendar. So all this was sort of thought out, I'd taken some pictures of them individually, but they had more synergy, which goes back to the last lesson of bring someone else into the frame. They had more synergy if they were together. And so, everything was designed. I shot this with a wide angle lens. You can see the reflection in their eyes. I had them facing away from the sun. Like we talked about, you get a little bit of sunlight kind of coming in their hats, but this was shot with oh no, I think I had a flash on this one, but you can see the catch light in her eyes here. But all this was by design. I mean, the way they're facing me, they're facing away from the sun, the windmill in the background, shooting over the top of the horse's head. And everything was by design. And I shot at a lower angle, because one of the big hallmarks of big ranch country are the big skies. And I want to make sure you can see plenty of sky. And then even from a design standpoint, that gave the designer, if they wanted to put the title of, the August or whatever month this ran back in the day, or put the title of the calendar wherever it was, they had plenty of room for that. So if you're going to change the angle up, I always like shooting at a lower angle and shooting up at someone. I just think it makes them look more powerful. It accentuates the things in the picture that aren't so important, like this was taken in the wintertime, so a bunch of dead grass really didn't do much for anybody, and a lot of blue sky, which without a lot of character to the sky either. And so by shooting at a low angle and then making some of that grass just take up some of that blue spot. I just think it worked out better. Now this one is a little bit of a caveat. I had him facing the sun, but that was literally like the first 2 minutes of sunrise. And so it wasn't very bright yet, but it had a great glow to it. And then you saw this feller earlier. Again, the low angle, I think, is really a dynamic angle for shooting pictures of people in the outdoors. And a lot of times what I'm trying to do from a low angle, like I said on the last one, is just trying to cover up the uninteresting stuff. Like again, the sky is completely blue. There's not a lot interesting about it, but just by going at a lower angle and putting him more in the sky, it helps break up all that blue. This picture, in fact, ended up being the double page spread in the lead for that article, the Farming for Fireflies. And these are a couple of chuck wagon cooks out in West Texas. And again, just a better angle. I shot one angle straight down, but it was more kind of what he was cooking. Again, he was part of the picture, but more sort of a graphical element in the picture. And so I shot at a low angle and shot up. So you try the eye level angle, but then try the low angle as well. It's a pretty dynamic angle, and I end up doing that a lot. And then this is a big question here: to smile or not to smile? Well, I think it's all subject dependent. If they want to smile and they feel comfortable smiling, by all means, get them to smile, and you'll see it. I'll do both kind of pictures when I'm out taking pictures of people. I'll get them to smile for me, and then I'll get them not to smile. Try not to get them scowling. The kind of a sort of a content look on their face is what I try to coach them to, and because some people don't like smiling real big on camera. And so you're trying to find what makes them comfortable, and you'll be able to see it. The first time you say, okay, give me a smile on count of three, you'll be able to see it, whether they're comfortable smiling or not. And it's just a lot of this is paying attention to the nonverbal cues that they give you. Again, we talked about making people comfortable. That's first and foremost. Getting them to do something, getting them to demonstrate something, add another person to it, to the frame, getting them to face away from the sun or putting them in the shade so they're not squinting. And then the same way here, to smile or not to smile, you let your subject be your guide. They'll tell you if they're comfortable smiling or not. They may not tell you with words, but they'll tell you with body language, and you'll be able to spot it pretty quick. So I try to get both kinds if I feel like I can get away with it, but sometimes it's okay not to smile. And like the picture on the left, this is all natural lighting coming through a window in the picture on the left is actually in a church. And that was the sun was this was non-direct soft lighting coming through. I just had him look out the window right then and just kind of, he wasn't going to smile real big. It was kind of off brand for him to smile really big, I think, in this sense. And so I just kind of got him to get a little bit of a content look on his face. And the same way with the guy in the upper right, all natural light, side lighting, a content look. And then the picture of the boy, again, my son there with holding the pumpkin when I did that shoot with him and his sister. Sun's to his back, a little bit of flare. I'm okay with that. Try to eliminate as much sky as I could in that picture because the sky is the most uninteresting part. But I told him to give me a big smile, and he was always willing to do it. And I think I'm coming towards the end here, but I always think you need to mind the details as well. Because when you're out taking pictures of people and you're out trying to cover a subject, again, whether it's for editorial use or whether you're just trying to document the Little League baseball game or whatever else you're trying to do, I always was taught that every story that's ever been told starts at the beginning, a middle, and an end, and it's all the details in between that help flesh out that story and help make it real, where people can empathize with it and really internalize it. And so one of the things I learned to do a long time ago that I think has really helped me and my ability to tell stories with the camera is mind the details. And what I mean by that is when people are demonstrating things to you, be on the lookout for shots like this. The young man I showed you earlier that was the produce farmer, just a picture of his harvest in his hands. And it's not a picture of him, but when you put this together with a portrait of him and then some pictures of the plants that he's growing and just some general farm scenes all around, or whatever scenes that is, substitute farm with whatever word you want to substitute it for. When all of a sudden, when you've got all these pictures and you've taken the time to really shoot detail shots, you start laying those out together, and all of a sudden they sort of tell a complete story without you ever having to write a word. because it just helps kind of bring everything together. And one of the things I like doing when I take pictures, because one of the things you'll notice is a lot of the people in these pictures are all working people. And with working people, the hands are important and their gear is important. And so things like their old rugged boots that have, been in the stirrup for a million miles and have really seen a lot of wear and tear and seen tough times. I think that's important too. So in the portrait I took of this guy, if you notice where the shadows fall, the sun's at his back because the shadows are falling towards me. But again, this was shot with an 85 millimeter f1.2 lens because to me, I like the way this looks. It's subtle, but I just like the way that this boot on the right hand side of the frame is in focus, but the boot on the left hand side, it all kinds of falls off and sort of takes that diagonal that diagonal compositional line and just slowly gets out of focus as you get towards the top of the frame. And so I think that's to me, I like that look. And so that's all part of mine in the details, or look for details in this stuff. There's details everywhere. Again, it may be a little kid's hands holding a bat, just his hands. It may be just a pin or something that they've got on a cap. It may be just a dirty old beat up cap that they're wearing, or maybe just their hand holding the cap beside their head. Just look at those details, because again, all these details is what helps tell the story is us as humans and things that we do. And it's all that stuff is important as you go through your photographic journey and you're trying to figure out how to take dynamic pictures of people in the outdoors. And really the number one thing is have fun. And I mean, have fun, not only for you, but also just make sure the person that you meet and you're taking pictures of have fun. As I look back on all the years I've taken pictures, if I can say I've been really good at anything, again, I said before, I think I can take good pictures, but would I consider myself the best that ever was? Absolutely not. I'd never do that. I think I've been pretty good at the genre that I chose to take pictures in. But I'd be wholly unsuccessful as a wedding photographer. I'd be wholly unsuccessful as probably an NFL photographer or something like that. And so the genre that I've chosen to focus my life's work in, I think I've done a pretty good job there. But I think the most brilliant thing I've ever done is just to really have a spirit of having fun while I've been meeting these new people. Because a lot of the people you see in these pictures, if I didn't have a relationship with them before, a lot of them I still have a relationship with today. In fact, I shot pictures of a guy for a magazine story probably 10 or 15 years ago. And I just talked to him last weekend. We stay in touch all the time. And just the personal connections I've been able to make through the years and still stay in contact with people. And really, that's important too from a professional standpoint, is because all of a sudden you make connections, you have fun with someone you're photographing, and then they know somebody that may help you get to the next spot that you want to get. And so that networking part is really, really valuable. But the thing is just, again, have fun what you're doing. Make sure the people around you have fun. And if you'll follow those steps I've talked about, where you're making your subject comfortable, and your subject's comfortability is first and foremost, and then your pictures come second, people reciprocate that, whether a professional model or not. People will really reciprocate that by relaxing, letting you into their world, and then being able to just take good pictures of them in the outdoors. So with that said, I think the rest of these pictures are just a show and tell. I'll just kind of break them down really quick for you in the 10 minutes that we have left, and we've got a little time for Q&A. I'll make sure we have time for that. But this is a shot, just natural light coming through a big door on the front of this building, and just a really kind of natural shot, natural light. And this guy was a musician, and we were talking about his career, and he was kind of looking outside, explaining that where he's been and where he wants to go in his music career. And so I'm sitting there this was shot with a 50 millimeter f1.4 lens. And as he got to talking, he noticed the first couple of times I took a picture, but I wasn't over the top with it. I just kind of was listening to him and kept talking and just shot pictures along the way. And this is one of my favorite ones of the bunch here. And then we met her earlier. She was the one looking at the cat with the shovel in her hand. And this is a hard-working woman. She, her and her dad run this big ranch in North Texas by themselves. And this is her moving a little bit of hay. So we took the time to light this correctly inside of a barn. It was a little flat. We didn't have a good indirect light, so I brought a flash in there and just illuminated her with the flash, and you can see where the shadows fall behind her. And again, we met him earlier too. This was after the sun went down, and we brought in almost all artificial light other than the sun. But there's that Superman angle I'm telling you about. Shoot low and put something interesting in the foreground. Luckily on this one, we had an interesting sky in the background and an interesting foreground, so it all kind of worked together. And then we met Jared earlier. This was when he was younger. I really liked that adobe wall that he was standing against, and wanted to get a nice profile shot of him. So this was him when he was probably about 17 years old when I took that picture of him. And this is more of a graphical style. These are some of the cowboys on a ranch I was at, and they were just moving around in the pre-dawn light. And I just this was a happy accident. I've always liked this picture just because it's got a lot of mystery to it. Straight up photojournalism, but it's got a lot of mystery to it. I've always enjoyed that one. And again, not quite the Superman pose like we talked about, but you can see the blurry grass in the foreground. I definitely got from a low angle here and shot up at these people because I was trying to shoot for a magazine cover on this one, and really just trying to give the graphic designer plenty of room to put text and stuff, but really trying to make it interesting because we were standing out in this, can't always control when you take pictures. So this field we were in was early in its maturity. So there wasn't a crop to show, but it was just, again, not even ankle high wheat that was growing. So I got really, really low to shoot and laying on the ground to be able to shoot this, to use the blue sky and the green grass as my graphical elements to sort of frame them in between it. But again, shot at a low angle. And a lot of these things we do, one of the things about photography that I tell people all the time, if you look at Google Maps and you say, Fred, you wanted to drive down and see me, and you made directions to go from New York City to Dodge City, Texas. Google Maps are going to give you 3 ways to get here, but the thing about it is that all 3 ways will get you to the same place. And so what I try to tell people is find that route that is most efficient for you, that you can remember most, and then it's just wash, rinse, and repeat after that. It's and that's what I do. If you noticed on these pictures and you go back and look at this presentation, over and over and over, I'm doing the same thing because I found my route and it works good for me and the technique works good for me. So I just try to replicate it each and every time. And this is we met her before. That was one of the cowgirls. Her name's Amanda. She was on the horse with her sister Emily earlier that I talked a little bit about. And this was a picture of a world-renowned quail scientist out on the range, on the ranch where he did his work that made him so famous. And this was a shot I did for a magazine, but this brought in 3 flashes, had to overpower the sun. But again, the lesson is sun's at his back. And I was bringing all the light in because that's so key to keep the sun at people's back. 85 millimeter f1.2, just love the background it gives you. Really thin depth of field. They're hard to use, but it just, pictures like that to me make a lot of difference in the way that people look. Again, wash, rinse, repeat. Superman pose, low angle, brought in some light to fill it in, and just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and it'll give you good results. This was for a magazine story about this these No-Kona baseball gloves. It may be different now, but at the time it was like the only American-made baseball glove that was purely made in America, and it was made in a small town here in Texas, the town of No-Kona. It's still open. And so this was a shot I did for a story about that place. And then there's my boy again. You saw him. And then another cover shot, wash, rinse, and repeat, give people something to do. The sun wasn't out this day, as I recall, but still had to bring a little bit of light in. This was lit with a flash to give them a little bit of detail. But again, it's just the same thing over and over and over again. This is the shot I was telling you about. So one of the things I always encourage people to do is if I cover this and I didn't make sense something, or I didn't make sense about something, and you're going through it later on and you come up with a question in your head, feel free to send me an email. Always happy to reach out, and always happy to share what I do with other people. So don't be a stranger. And I just saw Fred pop back on. Hey, Fred.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
All right.
Is there any questions?
Oh, all right, everybody. Here's your chance to ask Russell any questions in the chat. But in the meantime, I'll get the ball rolling. Russell, You showed us a lot of assignment work from different magazines and stories. Has there ever been a topic you were uncomfortable is not the right word, maybe just not as passionate about?
You know, I can't really think of one because I've always kind of been of the opinion that if someone asked me to do it, uh, well, if I'm not passionate about it, I'm probably not going to take pictures of doing it. And if someone takes the time to ask me to do it for them, then I'm going to take it as serious as what they are about asking me to do it. So I always try to be passionate, but a lot of this too is it's sort of the guardrails I've put on my career, whether good or bad, is just, I've always just tried to shoot with things I was most comfortable with, and that's
Mhm.
sort of rural life and rural lifestyles.
Um, is there any advice for those new photographers that aren't receiving assignments yet to get a good broad spectrum of work like you have?
Just keep at it. A lot of these things early on, when I was before I got assignments, especially when it included people, one of the things I just try to do is take pictures of my kids. Just that's where I cut my teeth and practiced, and I built a body of work based around them. I learned a long time ago, Fred, that homemade models work really, really cheap. You don't have to pay them, and
Mhm.
so uh, I use my kids to cut my teeth and learn all these things. And so I still do that today whenever I'm trying to learn a new technique or something else. But a lot of it's just persistence and keep trying and keep trying.
Okay. We got a question from Winsome.
Okay.
When you're using multiple flashes, do you have an assistant helping you, or is each flash on a stand?
So usually, well, it's both. Let me tell you how my assistant system works. Usually, if I have an assistant, it's either my son or my brother who I say, hey, if you want to go with me, I'll buy you lunch. Come hang out with me today, and they'll just come help me. So usually, if I have someone else with me, I'll just get them to hold a reflector. But a lot of times, if I don't have time or I'm trying to move quicker and someone can't go with me, I'll just use stands, and I'll use stands not only for the flashes but also they make reflector holders that you can put on a stand, and I'll use those reflector holders to put the light where I want it to.
Looks like Winsome beat Netchi because he had the exact same question. Um, are- so before we started in the green room, we were talking about your time in New York City around 30 Rock and Radio City.
Uh-huh.
Uh, is there anything you'd change about your method in that sort of urban environment from how you shoot in the great outdoors?
Not, I mean, not really. I mean, really, I see these, and I don't know what to think about it. So what I'm going to say is not an indictment of people who do this, but I've seen videos online of people who do street photography, and then you know, uh, that just shoot pictures of people that they're real aggressive in their approach, and they don't ask people's permission. They're just putting a camera in their face and taking pictures. That's just not me, so I'd never do anything like that. So if I was to come to New York City and hang out with you, Fred, I mean, I would take the exact same approach. If we were to go out on the street and take pictures by Radio City Music Hall, I would take the exact same approach with you. Just get you comfortable first, figure out what you're going to do with your hands, or let you figure out what you're going to do with your hands, and then just kind of take it slow, really.
Mhm.
Because what's to me, what's more important for me in the end is not that, I mean, I'm going to get pictures I can use. I know I will, but what's most important for me is for you to have a good experience, and you to go away thinking, you know what, that was a lot of fun. I'm glad I got to meet Russell. We're going to stay in contact with each other, and I'd like to do it again sometime. That's what's most important for me. So
Cool.
that's why I tend to take sort of a slow approach, and but that's too. I don't. That's the way I was raised. I mean, you I was raised by a family that would take the relationship first, and then secondly the work. You've always got time to do the work. You just get the relationship off to some kind of start, and then the rest will follow. And so that's kind of my approach, is really get people comfortable in the whole approach. And sometimes they get comfortable quick. Sometimes it may take 30 minutes or 45 minutes, but I try to be patient through the process, try to take their time, because it always reciprocates back to me. Because I mean, the hardest part of me doing this presentation today was culling down the pictures I wanted to show people. I mean, I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures I've done like this, all using the same approach.
All right, we got two more, and then we'll call it a day so you can get back to your day. Netchi's asking, when you are using the Superman pose, do you still focus on the person's eyes?
I do. It's a little less because usually on that Superman pose, I'm shooting with a wide angle lens. It's a little less critical, but I'll still put the focus point on their face. And if you notice those pictures, and I can't go back now because we're done sharing, but if you notice those pictures, they're shot, they're not shot probably at f2.8, it's more like f5.6, still shallow depth of field, but the most important thing is I'm gonna make sure their face is in focus.
And then Ranch 11 Gal, she started our whole chat by saying hello from Far West Texas.
Oh, can you ask her where in Far West Texas? I'd like to know. I used to live in West Texas if she can hear.
She'll hear us in a second, but
Okay.
her question to end the chat. Earlier you said you like the gold reflector. How do you use it?
Well, so if you go on bnhphoto.com, they'll sell these 5-in-1 reflectors, and that's where I've always bought them from. And so they call them 5-in-1. I buy those because they're cheap and they give you a lot of flexibility. So one side will have they call it a 5-in-1 because one is like a sheer screen that works as a scrim. You can make shade over somebody, and it's filtered light. And then another side will have like a silver and a white side, and then and then the one I use has a gold on one side and a black on the other. So with the gold reflector side, it's like shooting pool. If the sun's coming at you here, you can hold the reflector that's opposite of the sun, like it's its own sun pointing back at the sun, and then you can adjust it and think about the angles and how you want the light to bounce. And so you can adjust it right or left to be able to point the light off the reflector where you want it to go. And when I'm training people using an assistant and I'm getting them to hold the reflector, that's how I teach them. It's like shooting pool. If you bounce a pool ball into another pool ball at an angle, it's going to go off at an angle. And so that's how you got to think about it. And so and those things are so easy to practice with at home too. So I just find the sun, get the reflector perpendicular to the sun, and then I can bounce it, and I can put full light on somebody, or I can kind of shade it off a little bit and aim it away from them where it's kind of catching them with a little less intense light. So those reflectors, that may be aside from a tripod, and that's a whole different webinar for a whole different day. Aside from a tripod, a reflector may be the lowest tech but most valuable piece of camera equipment that I've ever owned.
Nice.
Or photography equipment that I've ever owned, because they're so valuable, not only for people pictures, but if you're doing landscapes and you're trying to bounce a little bit of light in front on some sort of foreground object, or you're shooting pictures of flowers or anything else, there's such a they cost $35, and they're maybe the most versatile tool that you have that will help you in a lot of different photographic scenarios.
Yeah, she just mentioned I've got reflectors, just haven't used the gold one a lot. So
use the gold one. To me, the gold one mimics the sunlight, the golden hour of the sunlight better than the silver one does, or better than the white one does.
Mm-hmm. All right, and she said she's from Valentine.
Oh, that is Far West Texas. Yeah. Valentine, if you go from Valentine to Marfa, Texas, there's a Prada store along the way. Did you know
that?
that?
Yeah, on that empty road. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it is.
Cool. All right. Well, everybody, thank you for your questions. A big thank you for watching. Russell, we love having you here. We're all looking. No, thanks. We're all looking forward to you teaching us again. That should be coming up shortly. I think you're coming through again, maybe this month, maybe October.
So.
Cool.
I hope so. So we'll see. I'll see.
Right.
Just tell me when it is. I'll be there.
Cool.
All right.
All right, everybody. This has been another edition of the B&H Virtual Event Space. Why don't you all have a great day?
Thank y'all.